always, bringing you nothing but the best. But tonight, we have an actual icon, an actual legend. You hear people use that word and throw it around a lot, but today we have one on my show. So, Illini Nation, I want you to welcome today's guest. He was the 12th pick in the NBA draft. He was an All-American in 1965 as he graduated from the University of Illinois. I'm going to give you some names that he went on that All-American list with. Rick Barry, Billy Cunningham, who also became one of the senators. Bill Bradley, who became one of the senators, as well as Billy Cunningham. He also joined one of the best fraternities on campus, and anybody that knows ZBTs had a lot of fun at their house. People, welcome my friend, my mentor, Tal Brody. Tal, welcome, my friend.
Thank you, Deon. You can add to that list Jerry Sloan, Gail Goodridge, Dave Stoward. We had a nice, that was the top 10 coming out of college in 65.
Yes, it was the Converse top 10.
College all-star team. It was a great college all-star team.
It was the Converse all-star team or something like that, right? It was sponsored by like Converse.
No, it was put together. There was a Converse all-star team also, but this team was put together to play 2 games against the Russian team that came into the United States.
Oh, wow.
Billy Bunton also was on there that played with Cassie Russell at Michigan.
Mm-hmm.
With Walt Sam. Walt Sam was the center at Notre Dame, and then Billy Bunton, it was like Bloody Nose Alley if you would drive down Michigan in the middle. He played with Cassie Russell at the time. But within the top 10 players of the U.S., we had you're right, Billy Cunningham, Rick Barry, Bill Bradley, Gail Goodridge, Jerry Sloan. Good graduating class. That was the years when Wilt Chamberlain was making $100,000 a year, and Bill Russell got $101,000 because he wanted to be the highest paid player in the NBA. And you know what all of us signed for?
What?
Was about $12,000 to $12,500 a year.
Wow.
That's why Bill went to play in Simmental. I went to play in Israel. And Cunningham and Rick Barry, they went to play in the ABA. And then Dr. J followed him and also played in the NBA, Well, the NBA was a competitor of the NBA, American Basketball League, as they called it. But that's the David Stern era.
We'll definitely get into some of that because you have had some very powerful friends in the NBA, and Commissioner Stern was one of those. But Tal, a lot of people that are listening to me are younger, so they will not understand the how important you are to Illinois basketball history. But before we get to the University of Illinois, let's talk a little bit about how Tal got into basketball. I know you started playing at an early age, around 8, 9 years old. You started playing in the JCC, which is the Jewish Community Center, and with PAL, which is the Police Athletic League. What was the draw for you to basketball?
Well, I was born in Trenton, New Jersey, and practically on every corner, you had either a Jewish Community Center basketball facility, and you had the police athletic facility around in the community and the boys club. And basketball in Trenton was the name of the game. That was the game being played. We didn't have soccer at that period of time. Mm-hmm. American football was strong. American baseball was strong. But basketball was a game of Trenton. And so I started out in the Biddy League there and went up to junior high school, Trenton Central. We won the state championship in 100 years. Nobody beat our record, 24-0. We beat Camden. And then the University of Illinois, they had an Eastern scout. They had a very strong centers coming in, big forwards coming in, and they were looking for an Eastern guard. So the Illinois scout on the East Coast asked me if I would like to go out to play at Illinois. And my high school coach said, well, look, you have 40 offers, but you're not going to go running around to 40 colleges. So go down to see the Atlantic Coast Conference, go to see the Big East, go down to Houston and Texas and that area, that conference, but go out to the Big Ten and to see what you feel about the university. So when I went out there, the coach was Harry Combs and also Bill Wright and Brown was the assistant coach. And, I saw they had a very good team coming in, and the assembly hall was going to come in the next year.
Mhm.
But freshmen weren't allowed to play varsity at that period of time. And so I would be the guard playing against Jerry Colangelo, that was a senior with 4 juniors. But they said, look, Tal, if you succeed in your freshman year, you'll go up and be a starting sophomore guard with 4 seniors. So that freshman year, I had alongside of me from Carver High School that scored 100 points a game, one game. And so we had a good freshman team, but we're always the opposite team preparing the varsity team for their Big Ten games. Cunningham was named from Carver. And so my sophomore year, I went up with 4 juniors, and we were number 3 in the nation. I remember the game passing to Dave Downey, they scoring 53 points in their record-breaking game against Indiana.
Oh, yes.
And we had a great team. We went into Kentucky Classic with Adolph Rupp when Pat Riley was on the team. He was a starter at Kentucky, Louis Dampier. And they were so embarrassed that Illinois, we came in there and beat them in the Kentucky Classic, which was something unbelievable. They never lost in a Kentucky Classic. And then we went on to Madison Square Garden in the Holiday Festival tournament. We beat NYU. They had great teams at that time. And then we went up to the finals against West Virginia with Rob Thorne, that went on to be the guy that was controlling all the fines of the players in the NBA, the senior vice president. And he was the star of West Virginia. He took Jerry West's place, and we won the Holiday Festival. But we were okay in the NCAA tournament until in the semifinals, we got to play Loyola of Chicago. Now, Loyola, at that period of time, had a great basketball team. We were up there number 3. Loyola was up there. Cincinnati was up there with Tom Thacker, Ron Bonham, and had a big center at that time. But that was the top teams at that period of time. So we got up after beating Bowling Green with Nate Thurman. We went up and they beat us in the semifinals, and they went up and they won the championship that year. Loyola with they had a hell of a team. They Vic Rouse and their guard was very good too. They had a good guard.
Yeah.
And they were tough. Then their program went down, and you didn't hear about Loyola for a lot of years until about a couple of years ago. They came back. They came back up in a small school in Chicago, but they came up really strong in basketball again.
Yeah, they did. They had I had really good friends with their head coach at the time, and now he's down in Oklahoma. But you were mentioned earlier about coming out of high school. So when you came out of the high school, you were an All-American. You were Player of the Year, I believe, in New Jersey at that time as well. You come to Illinois. Freshmen can't play, which in today's standard, if you thought you looked at that, freshmen would lose their minds if they couldn't play. So. Right. Tell me this, Tal, and this is just, I guess, maybe a little bit of a step away from basketball right now. You went to school at the University of Illinois, let's say during a very turbulent time in our country, period, during the 60s. How was your time there on campus, coming from New Jersey, to the mid, let's just be quite honest. At that time, I'm sure there were a lot more cornfields around around campus. What was that like? Oh, yes. Oh, yeah. So what was that like, choosing to go from New Jersey, Trenton, New Jersey, which is a big city, to small Champaign, Illinois, and just how did you fit in there personally outside of the athletic side of it?
Well, I'll tell you, by choosing Illinois, there are several reasons. Let's say, like coming out of high school, and as I said, within 40 universities, choosing, let's say, not Temple from the East Coast, where Harry Litwack, who was a very famous coach at that period of time, and when he came to the house, I remember him saying, Tal, why don't you come to Temple? You can be a big fish in a little pond. And so, and then after visiting Illinois, I said, Coach, I like to try my ability to try to be a big fish in a big pond. And, so that's basically how I got to Illinois. Now you're talking about turbulent times. I played in high school with one Jewish guy, 9 African-American ball players, or 10, and 2 other guys on the team. Now, when I went down to visit North Carolina State, it was still at the time of segregation. Bathrooms were separated, water fountains, and this was very strange for me coming from the East Coast. I mean, it was something we never saw, And so considering that I would travel up to Washington with the guys on our team, go down to New York, Long Beach, and Asbury Park in New Jersey for all type of tournaments. We were all the time traveling around in our free time, looking to play against other guys in basketball. And then when I went down to the South, in the Atlantic Coast Conference, I said to myself, how can I go to a school down here with these type of conditions when my friends that I played, in high school, from junior high to high school, 4 years in high school, and so putting all that together, seeing that Illinois had a great team coming in, they recruited Bogey Redmond, Skip Doreen, Jim Seeley, McHugh, and we had a good team at that time. And then to see what that varsity is with Dave Downey, Bill Small, we had Bill Burwell from the East Coast as well, great center. And so I saw that from the vision that we have a good team. Now, in that time of my life, all your dream was to play in the NBA. That's the only thing. So I'm thinking, if I'm going to go in that direction to the NBA, I got to play with the best team and the best basketball conference. And so that's how I saw the whole picture that basically said, okay, you're saying it's turbulent times and everything, but it's also a little bit before the Vietnam War, maybe the start of the Vietnam War. You have the time of President Kennedy being killed. I remember reading it on, first thing getting up in the morning on campus in Illinois. And so it was turbulent times, but Illinois was a big campus. But for me, the fact that it was big basketball, I looked at the conference at the best conference, and also taking at the same period of time, the Atlantic Coast Conference had the point shaving scandals, where guys were getting paid for money either to make shots or don't make shots, in order that score for the bookies in New York can fit how much money they're going to win or lose, depending on the score of the game. So that's when it fit in. I knew that my freshman year I wasn't going to play varsity, but I saw Jerry Colangelo at the guard, to learn from him, to see what, not to just go right into Big Ten basketball, to play against him and learn from him, which we did. We're still in communication up to today. I see him at the NBA All-Star weekends. I'm coming in 6,000 miles from Israel, and I meet these guys, Rick Barry all the time, Billy Cunningham, I see, Bill Bradley was a speaker one of the times. So that legend banquet is unbelievable, because you're meeting guys during all those various decades of basketball, built the game of basketball. You see Oscar, I saw him he's from Cincinnati, played with Oscar Robertson. I saw him in Cleveland. Jerry West, I saw him when our team played against the Los Angeles Lakers. He was the general manager there. So Elgin Baylor was with not San Diego Clippers, Los Angeles Clippers. And, this is the history of basketball, and I work with Wilt Chamberlain in his basketball camp with Claire B up in New York, I mean,
Wow.
this is the base of basketball in the United States, of growing up with it, so Illinois fit that picture. Illinois fit the picture. All of a sudden, instead of going on a bus, you got a private plane to fly to your games around Illinois. And Trenton, it's the capital. It's not the biggest city, but it was something because I had a goal. And that's why it didn't matter to me. Illinois was a big campus. Okay, you felt a little bit lost, but I roomed with Donnie Freeman the first year and Larry Bauer. Donnie Freeman went on to play ABA, also basketball. He was a good player, small forward at Illinois, but a great player, And so, yes, you're right. It could be turbulent times. It could be a guy coming from the East Coast, all of a sudden coming to a big school. But my concentration was playing with the University of Illinois, our team to succeed and get that experience to be ready to play NBA basketball. And, as you said, I was the 12th draft in the pick. And, it's interesting, but as I said, all my life was playing towards the NBA. And at that time, the Washington Wizards was the Baltimore Bullets. It's the same owner, Abe Poland. By the way, we have another player from Israel that's playing with the Washington Wizards now, Danny Avdija. He's doing a great job with Bradley Beal, and now they got a new guy, Tim Whittle or something. Tim Whittle?
Dinwiddie, yeah, Spencer.
What? Tim Whittle?
I think yes, that's close.
He came out of nowhere. All of a sudden, he takes Russell Westbrook's place. He's a great ball player.
He came from Jersey. Really good player, but some of the names you mentioned right now, just in this little excerpt, was for most would be mind blowing. I mean, these are Hall of Famers in the NBA. Some of the greatest players that have ever played in the NBA. One story you told me once before, and then I had an opportunity to meet him when we were covering the Maui Invitational a couple of years ago, was Bill Walton.
Bill Walton. Bill's an unbelievable guy. How this relationship and why did Bill Walton in his book that he just wrote in the 4th chapter said, I owe my life to Tal Brody. Yeah. It's like we're talking about the college all-star teams and everything. So the team that was chosen to represent the United States to the 1970 World Championships, which were held in the former Yugoslavia. And at that time, Bill was just getting out of high school, #1 basketball player in the United States, going to UCLA. Mm-hmm. And after my first 2 years in Israel, Vietnam started to get heated up. And at that time, they weren't taking academics, but they started to draft academics. And I got my draft notice to join the USA Army. And I went back. I did 2 years in the United States Army. And the U.S. Army's 4.5 million soldiers. You have sport is quite popular. Mm-hmm. So I made the U.S. Army team and then the U.S. Armed Forces team, with 7 of us were chosen to play with the United States team in the World Championships. Wow. And we had unbelievable. We had good ball players. Darnell Hillman that went on to play with the Indiana Pacers. Garfield Smith that went on to play with the Boston Celtics. We had a good group of guys. Now we were missing 5 players. So why? Because you weren't allowed to take NBA ball players, not in the Olympics and not in the World Championships. So the team picked up Billy Walton, young guy coming out of high school, stuttering at the time. And we were roommates, all through the training camp. So we played 100 games all over the world before that. And, wow. And then the team went to play in the World Championship. So we were roommates at that period of time, but he was like the coach used him as more or less like the 12th guy on the team. And sometimes he would give him to the other team. But Bill, he would be disappointed because the coach was an Army type coach, and he would get down on Bill. He would swear at him, I'm telling you. And every night we used to come back, and Bill was thinking about even giving up basketball. And we would
Wow.
talk, and we and I said that, Bill, I see your ability, and you're going to be a great college ball player. You're going to go on to play in the NBA. Don't let what is said, to you as a player right now, because he was a good ball player, but he was young, and these other guys were 4 years older than him.
Mhm.
So anyway, we became good friends all through the year. You also see him at the All-Star weekends. He's with his wife, and he's a great guy, and he doesn't stutter anymore. And he's an excellent speaker. And he
Right.
does the broadcast. He did with UB Brown, I think, he used on the radio. But he had that problem. He was voted in '77 the MVP of the NBA when the Portland Trailblazers won the NBA championship. So in this movie, which is they made on our team, On the Map, of 1977 team winning over the Soviet Union. We beat the Soviet Union 91-79, and then we went on to win the championships by 1.78-77. So he's one of the people speaking in the movie.
Yep.
And so he says, I was never so proud of my roommate Tal that in 1977, when he was the most valuable player in the NBA and winning the championship, that our team, Maccabi Tel Aviv, won our first European basketball championship over the Russians and over the Italians, which were great teams. I mean, so I had the honor of being on that first team captaining. You had the honor of being on 2 or 3 of those teams that won the European basketball championships, bringing that honor to Israel. So yeah, it's a nice history, to go back and to think about all the guys you met in your career. It's one of the most beautiful things of sports.
Yes.
You're lucky you have internet today. You got all that media today that you can keep contact. Zoom, you can keep contact with everybody.
Oh, no doubt. But you touched on something there that's amazing. With all of the players that you've met, again, coming out of college, you were an All-American. You were the 12th pick in the NBA draft. Well, I guess it was still the NBA draft, but they kind of had the ABA coming on too. But the 12th pick in the NBA draft. Why did you choose to go and play in Israel? What was it that really sparked you to make that change?
Let's put it in 2 phases. If it was today, and you're offered $3.5 million, as the 12th draft pick in the NBA, and if you're good, if you with a 2-year no-cut contract, and you open up your 3rd year, and it's going to jump up to $8 million a year, it could have been a different decision. But in 1965, when it was $12,500 a year, and then I was going to, I had the opportunity to play in what they call, it's the Maccabi Olympic Games. This is like the Jewish Olympics, which were held in Israel. And so I had the opportunity for the first time in my life to go out of the country, play with the US team in these Maccabi Games. And then when I went there, and after we did with the gold medal, but the most important thing was when after the game, the president of Maccabi Tel Aviv, he comes to me, and in the summer while he's talking to me, I see on his arm, he has the numbers written from the concentration camps. And this reminded me also in the 60s, when in going to the movies, all you would see is about World War II, Audie Murphy, John Wayne, all these big stars from that period of time. But, what would happen to the Jewish communities during the time of World War II? And he's asking me to take 1 year out of my life and come to Israel and help Maccabi Tel Aviv, that never went past the first round of the European Championship, to try to take the team to a higher level. And by doing that, the country will have a lot of pride. They'll feel, that, they're going through a very serious economic recession. There are boycotts around Israel. They said that, look, if the basketball team succeeds, it's going to bring a lot of honor to Israel. People will look at the country in a different perspective. And as I said, a lot of people will be proud. And so I said, you know what? I'll take a year out of my life. I didn't think it's going to be already 54 years, married to Tirza with 3 children and 11 grandchildren already here in Israel, 11 grandchildren.
Wow.
So I didn't realize it at the time, but I saw what was happening that first year, how important a sport can be to a country. It just
Mhm.
lifted up the morale of the whole country that's living, in a tough neighborhood.
No,
I
that
use
is
the phrase,
that it is.
tough neighborhood in the Middle East. And all of a sudden, basketball just changed the mood of the whole country. I mean,
Mhm.
you saw it, what happened, how the country, when you were on Maccabi, when you won the 3 championships, the 3 European championships. You saw what it was for the meaning for the country.
Yes.
And that's why I said, my first year, then I started a second year, the third year, when I wanted to stay in Israel, as I said, I went back, I did 2 years in the United States Army, finished the army and went back as a new immigrant to Israel. I have an American passport and Israeli passport. And 7 years later, we won our first European championship, and the rest is history.
Well, Tal, before we move on to the next one, because I want to make sure we touch on a little bit more of that, especially on the movie as well. But before we move on to the next topic, let me tell you guys a little bit about our partners over at Bet Rivers Sportsbook. If you haven't signed up with Bet Rivers yet, now's the time because they are offering a $250 match bonus for your first deposit. But what sets them apart is that they require just one playthrough to turn your bonus into cash money. With their new Rush Pay instant approval, withdrawing your winnings is safer, more secure, and more reliable. With basketball season in swing, get in the action by going to Bet Rivers today or by downloading the Bet Rivers iOS app, that is betrivers.com. If you're 21 years or older, must be 21 years or older. If you have a gambling problem, please call 1-800-GAMBLER. So I got to say thanks to Bet Rivers because they are my sponsor and they make this thing happen. But getting back to how you touched on earlier, as I mentioned, the ambassador that you have become and all of the things that you have done. And I use the word icon to describe you, not just because of your prowess on the basketball court, but the things that you have done globally through sport. As you mentioned, it is a great connector of people. And you have been able to take what you have done on the basketball court and translate that into doing things worldwide. And this is why I say you are an icon amongst icons. So you started to, and you mentioned it earlier, On the Map, the movie by Danny Minskin that I have had the pleasure of seeing. For those that have not seen it, please go online and you can find it. It's On the Map. It tells the story of how Tal led the Israeli national team the Maccabi team to winning its first EuroLeague championship. And it's an amazing story, but not just the story. Tal's going to tell you the quote that he made that made him a Israeli hero. He mentioned how raising that team to that point and the comment that he made, and I'm going to let Tal say it, really sparked the inner fire of a country that I love. Tal mentioned that he has dual citizenship. I too, along with my family, have dual citizenship. We're both American as well as Israeli, and it's a source of pride for me. But what was that quote, Tal? And then I'll let you take it from there.
Well, the quote came out of the Israel being like the Davids against Goliath, and for us, our team to go up against the Soviet Union team. Now, why do I stress the Soviet Union team? To understand how this came out of my heart is that the Soviet Union team is comprised not of the Russian team today, it's comprised of the 22 satellite countries. You take 25% of the NBA, most of those players are coming from the former Soviet Union. Slovenia, you have Doncic, you got Jokic at Denver, you got All the NBA is spread out with guys coming from Europe. And most of those guys are coming from the former Soviet bloc. So here you have the Soviet Union team that beat the United States team in the most controversial game ever played in the history of basketball, where 3 times with a few seconds left on the clock, they took the ball, they took the ball out, and they missed the shot, and then the referee says, okay, you know, we have to do it over again. And then they did it another third time. The third time, Alexander Belov made the shot on a long pass from the outside. But that's the Soviet Union team that won the US team, and they're coming up against an Israeli team. You know, you know, I think most of your viewers will say, what do they have to be afraid about playing against an Israeli team? Which is
they thought that too.
You know, the Soviet Union, at that time, we were about 3.5 million people in the country, about a third, that's almost like the amount of today. So nobody thought that we could even win. Now, when I see Sergei Belov, that was the captain of the team at the All-Star weekend at the international guest, I asked him, I said, how come the Soviet Union didn't want to play us in Israel and didn't want to let us play them in Russia? So he says it was politics, but then he said something very true. He said the government didn't take into account that playing on a small court that only 500 people could get into the game is a disadvantage for the Soviet Union team. Why? Of the 500 people, 498 were cheering for Israel. They only had 2 KGB agents that were cheering for the Soviet Union team. So how could we lose? So it was so exciting that the fact in this small town, they choose Verton in Belgium. Every elementary school in the United States had a better gym than the gym that they chose to play on a neutral court.
Wow.
And so out of the excitement of what happened after the game, that everybody just went onto the court, picked us up in the air. And as we're going off the court, the announcer, when he said, Tal, how do you feel about this game? It just came out of my heart. Now, you have to understand, Israel in 1977, it's only 30 years after the state of Israel was created. And so everything was new. You know, it was a period of time that everything was, you know, not any air conditioners in Israel, all our basketball, playing at Illinois with over 16,000 a game. You talk about the facilities, we would play in the middle of cow pastures and have to take all that manure in breathing and playing games, or playing the rain up in the north near Haifa, or in the cold in Jerusalem outdoors. But wow. I came with a purpose, 1 year to help build the basketball. So in taking all that into account, that this just came out of my heart, and winning the game and feeling the excitement that we are on the map. We are staying on the map, not only in sport, but in everything. And it's so true. The Berlin Wall has fell. Governments have fell apart all over the Middle East. And Israel is still standing strong and stronger than ever. But at that time, people didn't know what's going to be. And when I came out with saying we are on the map and staying on the map, it's 1977, after the Yom Kippur War, when we were attacked on the holiest day in Israel, Yom Kippur, when everybody was in the synagogues, and the country was just about to be, you know, ripped apart by the Syrian Air Force, by the Egyptian tanks and everything. And by the time that we got, reorganized and everything into the units and whatnot, so all this, we lost, it was over 2,600 soldiers. That's big for Israel. You know, if the United States lost 58,000 soldiers in Vietnam, I remember Bruce Capel, he was a football player at Illinois, the first guy that you realize that how close it was to you, the Vietnam War, to guys in the United States. He was a football player at that time at the University of Illinois. So, you know, by the Prime Minister Rabin said that you don't know, Tal, what this meant for the country after the Yom Kippur War, losing that many soldiers and 3.5 times, 4 times more injured. Every family in Israel was in more or less in mourning for the up to from 73 to 1977. And here comes a basketball team that just takes everybody out of the house into the streets, cheering, shouting, dancing, singing, and this was we are on that map. We are staying on that map, not only in sport and everything. And Israel today contributes so much to the world.
Yes.
Innovation Africa, Mashav, in agriculture, in water. Dikembe Mutombo was in Israel. He's doing a very good part with Israeli technology in Africa. You got in Haiti, you have all the disasters in the world. Israel is the first to be there, even with countries we're not in great relations with. Earthquakes in Turkey, the first people to call is Israel. Unfortunately, we have so much experience with
with disasters.
with disasters that
Yeah.
we know how to handle it in many different situations. Even, we don't have no relations in Syria, but we have a field hospital up on the Syrian border because they have an inter-conflict within themselves, between the Syrians themselves. It's a war that, wow, I think over 500,000, if not more people were killed, and so many people, a couple millions went out of the country. But Israel is helping the Syrians up in Syria, with a field hospital. Anybody has birth, they got injured, doesn't matter what side that they're on, they're being treated. So that's what I'm saying, that, it's to be in that situation and to play against the Soviet Union, which was the military advisors for all those countries that want to throw Israel into the sea. It's like, so that's how this just came out of me, that, in Hebrew, there you can say ala mapa or ba mapa, but in English, it's on the map. I'm very lucky in English. I was thinking of English, it's on the map. In Hebrew, everybody tries to judge it. Did you say ba mapa or ala mapa?
Right. Well, I'll tell you this, being an Israeli citizen, just hearing you tell that story again is touching to me. So I can't imagine how touching that would be for someone like my wife or her brothers and sisters who, at that time were alive when all of those things took place. That's one of the things that makes this relationship, this partnership between the US and Israel so strong, because of those interconnected movements, because of those similarities with having to deal with tragedy and having to deal with war and having to deal with those things. I mean, even when 9/11 happened, Israel was one of the first countries, I don't know who knows this or doesn't, but Israel was one of the first countries that was contacted by the US when, on how to deal with terrorism. When all of those things happened, and going to war over in the Middle East with Desert Storm and everything else, the Israelis was right there. So, I mean, you're 100% right. Your statement sparked a fire in Israel, and man, you have continued to do that everywhere you go around the world. But I'm going to turn this back to a little bit more about basketball. You've mentioned some of the relationships that you've had with players. You also had great relationships with people on the I guess in the office, in the front offices, that have really changed the basketball that we have today. David Stern, the current commissioner. Can you talk a little bit about those relationships that you were able to put together, and how, we're sitting here with a Hall of Famer, and for what you have done in this world of sports? Talk about some of those relationships and how you have worked hard to connect the NBA with Israel and European basketball as a whole.
Okay. As David Stern changed the basic game in the NBA and made it a globalization, took from the United States and just branched out all over the continents, and his influence has been, up to today, a tremendous influence on the game of basketball. Today you have NBA Africa, you got NBA We have what they call the Abraham Accord with the normalization and peace agreement with the United Arab Emirates, with Bahrain, with Morocco, with Sudan. And even now we had our first flight to Saudi Arabia. Things are changing in the world. We have to tell the students about that things are changing. You know,
Yes.
a lot of things happening on campus, but they have to start learning about international relations. So anyway, but it's and after Adam Silver came in, he was under David Stern, and you also have Kim Mahoney. So for our basketball, which is like European basketball, we were the first team to come in to play against the NBA. For 20 years, I was coming in with our CEO from Maccabi and help organizing our basketball games. Even when we played the New York Knicks, when Isaiah Thomas was coaching. So we did the press conference together. So I said, Isaiah, don't be disappointed when we come in to play the Knicks that nobody's going to be cheering for the Knicks. You're going to have over 18,000 people in Madison Square Garden cheering for Maccabi. Well, I said, don't worry, nobody's cheering for us anyway these days. But that's what really happened. We had a full house cheering for Maccabi Tel Aviv in Madison Square Garden. And so all through the years, I mean, we played from New York against the Knicks. We played the Brooklyn Nets when they went over to play to move over to Brooklyn, all the way out to the West Coast, the Clippers and also the Lakers when Jerry Buss gave us the game. And so Orlando Magic, Cleveland, the first year that LeBron was back in Cleveland, his first season we played, and it's always it was the 8 preliminary games. I think they cut it down to 7 in the NBA now. Right. And then we played the Toronto Raptors. They didn't think they're going to lose, and everybody was cheering for us in Toronto. And so we beat them in Toronto. And that's when Anthony Parker was playing for us. Anthony Parker, I think, Naperville.
Naperville, yeah.
Naperville, yeah, from Chicago. Anthony you played together with Anthony.
We played together, yeah.
That's right. And so Anthony he made the last shot of the game that we beat Toronto. So they said, well, look, guys, you beat us. You have to come back and get next year to play another game. Then they beat us the next year. So we've been coming in. And what that did, well, for Israeli basketball, it was amazing. It just picked up the whole image of the game of basketball, but it did that for Europe as well. Yeah. And even right before the Corona, the EuroLeague asked the NBA, instead of Maccabi Tel Aviv playing an NBA team, can they play a EuroLeague team, Armani Milano? But they didn't realize that the Jewish community supports an Israeli team, coming into the States, and you have Israelis also living in business and whatnot, technology in the States. So when we played in Chicago, we had half the stadium that was full for cheering for us, but the half that was supposed to cheer for Armani of Milano, only a few came. The same thing at Madison Square Garden, because half the tickets were given us, half were for the Milano team. Then we played the second game in Madison Square Garden. So they had about 500 fans came. With us, we could have filled up the whole stadium, but we only got half the tickets. So anyway, they realized that the EuroLeague, there's Maccabi Tel Aviv, and then there's the other teams as far as the popularity around the world. And so you felt it every place that you played with Maccabi in Europe, no matter where, are the support. But for international basketball, that the fact that David Stern developed this relationship and it expanded so far and it reached, they have NBA Cares, then they have Junior NBA and all these programs. They sent out coaches over the world. Billy Walton, in the beginning, he came back with UB White and they gave clinics, and then you had NBA that would send coaches around. So the NBA basically developed world basketball. And by doing that, as I say, today you have 25% of the NBA The
From
foreign
Europe.
players. Now, who's getting the NBA if not this year? Maybe Doncic. Who got it last year? Giannis. And so
Yeah.
and it's so you have a swing that's happening because of this globalization that nobody even thought about. What's the World Championship? What's the Olympics? That I think they thought it was automatically the U.S. team would win the Olympics, but there's nothing is automatic anymore. You have to play. You have to come to play because the U.S. teams have been getting beat in and they're now the NBA players are playing. But if you don't come to play, and the difference is that these European teams are playing together, their national teams.
Yes.
The NBA, when they put a team together, I think they're only practicing very little. It's after the finals of the NBA championships, and that's why they come into the games less prepared than all these European teams, and that's why they can get beat by Lithuania, they can get beat by the Russian team, or any of the teams. The Spanish team is very good. So the European teams are good, and they have players playing in the NBA.
Well, I agree with you. I think a lot of that influence from Commissioner Stern, may he rest in peace, from Commissioner Stern is really what created today's NBA. You talk about all of the players that have come over, the whole style of play has changed and become so global. I mean, you have Giannis and Kevin Durant, both close to 7 feet tall, being able to put the ball on the floor and shoot it and do all of those things. That's European basketball. I mean, that's what I ran into when I went over in 1994. And I was like, oh my God, big guys step out and shoot the ball. So all of that is, like you said, because of globalization and what he has brought to the table and the idea that he has transformed the basketball in the NBA to what it is today. And can't be more, as a fan of my Chicago Bulls and every, and watching all of these other young guys as they continue to improve and grow, you can't be happy. You can't be anything but happy and appreciative for what he has done. So, Tal, I'm going to let you get out of here. I know you got to get to the Maccabi game. Please cheer my buddies on tonight. Tell Shimon I said hello when you have an opportunity to see him. And David Fetterman and the others, if you have an opportunity to talk to him. For everybody that don't know, those are the owners of Maccabi Tel Aviv. When what I like to do is to give my guests, the last minute to say anything that you would like to the University of Illinois faithful that are listening to us this evening. So, Tal, the mic is yours.
I'll tell you from the educational point, it's because, and I never forgot for 1 minute the fact that Harry Combs and the coaching staff sent us as young players out to speak at banquets and ceremonies, award ceremonies for high schools, and we were scared stiff. But this experience that they said, guys, this will be an experience for your life, start now. This has helped me all through my career, how I was educated at the University of Illinois. By being afraid and going out and speaking at a banquet, a high school sports banquet at the end of the season, it prepared me basically for life. And this position as an ambassador of goodwill, even when I was in China, they asked me, what's an ambassador of goodwill? I said, well, take Yao Ming. And Yao Ming, if anybody doesn't know, he played with Houston Rockets, but he's about 7'6", I think, or something like that. But if you take Yao Ming and send him around the world, he would create a lot of goodwill. And this part of being a player at the University of Illinois and being coached and being trained, not only as a basketball player, but off the court, to be able to go not only play before 15, 20,000 people, but to be able to speak, which is a different story, before 1,000 people, before 500 people, before 100 people. And that's the lesson that I learned from Illinois. And that's why it gave me the confidence to do what I'm doing as an ambassador of goodwill for Israel for the last 12 years in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And so I enjoy that position. And I think it's important to understand Israel. And I'm very indebted to the University of Illinois. I enjoy all my visits back from the first visit when they called me, Tal, you've been selected at the I-Man of the Year. And then I said, well, you sure you got the same guy? I haven't been back for 30 years. But since then, in the shirt hanging ceremony, came back. It was beautiful. All the guys, Dave Downey, Bill Burwell, Bob Starnes, Bill Small, all those guys came back, and it was great. So thank you very much, Illinois. Thank you very much, Deon. It's great. We'll see you back in Israel. I'll see you in the States, and we'll go from there. Thank you.
Tal, I thank you, my friend. I thank you for being my friend. As I mentioned, thank you for being a mentor. Illini Nation, applause to Tal Brody, international icon, University of Illinois Athletics Hall of Famer, All-American at the University of Illinois. He not only put Israel on the map, he helped put us on the map as well. So I'm going to close it out, say goodnight. But as always, go on to Spotify or Apple Music, subscribe to the podcast, Champagne on Ice, and please pay attention to my partners, the Field of 68 Media. They have also some great content that I believe there's, a variety of podcasts like my own covering the 68 best teams in the country. Go on, give them a like, give them a subscribe, the Field of 68. And to my partners at Bet Rivers Sportsbook, thank you. Could not do this without you, and I appreciate it. Champagne on Ice, closing out. ILL.